these THC-infused beverages are really tasty. It's funny how liberated you get when you're not going to run again. I didn't realize I was going to speak. I was told that this was a gathering at which I could introduce myself as someone seeking employment. So if I was looking for staff, you know who to call. Most importantly, thank you. Pat, you and the chamber, all of you have been such extraordinary examples and models, more than examples, of what's so great about our country. Democrats, Republicans, independents, decent people, working hard, caring about community, investing in community, building businesses, and being respectful. And I'm just really grateful to all of you because you fueled me in a very difficult environment. It goes without saying. Very few get to represent districts like this one, where you can be respectful, you can be a bridge builder, and be rewarded for it instead of so many of my colleagues who are being punished for it. And that accrues to all of you. No matter your politics, I love you all, and I just want to say thank you. It has been a great blessing these last 6 years. I've learned a lot. I've visited a number of your businesses and hope to continue to do so. So thank you. Heartfelt gratitude for being the best of America. I thought I'd just make some brief remarks about this session of Congress. They'll be brief because not a lot has gotten done. Most importantly, I really love the Q&A that result from these gatherings. So anything that's on your mind, please ask. And you know I'm very willing to get into trouble by telling you the truth. So bring it on. You all recall that this Congress started with the 15 rounds voting for McCarthy for Speaker of the House, which finally happened. And I think one of the great tragedies of this Congress is actually the way that he lost his job. And it has kind of set the tone for a very unproductive, contentious Congress. When he was dismissed, if you remember, it was the Freedom Caucus that was disappointed in him for ensuring the government didn't shut down at the end of the day. That's what this was really about, and he lost his job over that. You'll also recall probably that a number of Democrats, myself included, protected Speaker Johnson when he faced the same thing not that long ago, when his right flank was trying to push him out for the same thing, for being reasonable. And that was actually a wonderful moment in Congress, where you actually saw Democrats coming to the rescue of a Republican speaker, which is about as unusual and unexpected as you can imagine. The sad truth is we are really struggling just to get the basics done. We have not yet passed our budget bills, as you're probably aware. We will be facing yet another government shutdown on September 30th when the money runs out. And I don't see this happening because we've got, I think, a total of 12 bills, only 6 have been passed. And I do not see the next number of weeks being terribly productive. We will probably have to do what we call a CR, continuing resolution, to ensure the government stays open. Now I say that with also some respect for my Freedom Caucus colleagues who are simply trying, not simply, who are trying to bring attention to the irresponsible fiscal management of our government. And it goes without saying. It is a tragedy. It is both parties have completely abandoned any of their responsibilities as it relates to fiscal responsibility. And this goes back to the reward system. There is no reward right now for being fiscally responsible. Even Republicans, there is no reward. I've never had someone come to my office and ask me to spend less on the program that's important to them and to raise their taxes. I've never had that happen in my life, and that is the root of this. You are rewarded for spending more on people's programs and lowering taxes. And that's why we find ourselves in this really difficult predicament. You all are probably aware our national debt now exceeds $30 trillion. In fact, we had an event just a couple days ago where we celebrated the community project funding that we brought back to the 3rd District. I think we brought back, is it $68 million? I think $68 million we brought to the 3rd District for water improvement projects and parks and roads and all kinds of important projects. And when I was doing the celebration a couple days ago, I pointed out the fact that that's 5 minutes of federal spending. $68 million, can you imagine that? I think we spend $12 million per minute, just federal dollars, $12 million per minute. Our deficit this year is gonna be $1.9 trillion. Our debt service is approaching $900 billion, which is the real problem. And I think I should start with that. You know as well as anybody, You can't continue to use a credit card and not pay it off, and that's what we're doing. It was not as big of a deal when we had low interest rates. Of course, with the interest rate spikes, we are now about to spend more on our past, which is our debt, than we are on our future, which is investing in kids and communities. In fact, it is now going to exceed our defense budget, which alone is already larger than the next 8 countries in the world combined. So it is irresponsible. And this all results from very vested, connected interests in Washington that have made an art and science out of bringing the dollars to their businesses. And that's the military-industrial complex and the political-industrial complex. I have started to take positions where I voted against the defense bill because we are out of control now in our spending. But I will tell you that it has really been difficult to try to express my perspectives on fiscal responsibility when faced with very simple up and down votes about keeping the government open or keeping our bills paid. And it is a design flaw of our Congress that puts members of Congress in these positions, and there's no reward for responsibility. I don't know when this will come home to roost, but when foreign investors stop looking at the United States of America as the safest place to deploy their capital, it's too late. We're still okay, but I'm deeply concerned. And the only way we can accomplish the change we need, of course, is by spending less and actually generating a little bit more revenue. That's the only way we can fix this. And I just wish, I hope future generations will do so. We also have some issues, of course, our foreign affairs. I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm the ranking member of the Middle East Subcommittee, which of course has been a tragic year in the Middle East. But we were able to pass, as you know, a bipartisan support bill to support our friends in Ukraine and in Israel, ensure that we provide the humanitarian aid necessary also to take care of human beings. But it's getting more complicated, and our national brand has eroded in the eyes of many around the world, and it's because of our unnecessary dysfunction. And with all that said, I will tell you, I think the angertainment industry, which I reference regularly, angertainment, would have us believe that we are more divided than we really are. You know, when I ran for president, I didn't meet one person on any side of the aisle, including at MAGA rallies, who was disrespectful or unfriendly. Just the opposite. Friendly, decent, cool people who just see things differently than others and vice versa. And that is my biggest takeaway from this tenure in Congress, is that our country is remarkable. We also got to get our shit together. And that means, to put it in terms we can all understand, it's as simple as that. You know, it's nonsensical. We're rewarding people for being jerks. We're punishing courage, and we're rewarding cowardice at the top levels of government. And I think my most important request of all of you, to the extent you can engage in this work, is to encourage people to participate. About 1 in 10 Americans voted in primary elections this year. 1 in 10. So the 90%, we all complain in November about our choices, you know, we're not participating. 1 in 10 in the greatest democracy in the world. You know, we're the ebb of talented young people pursuing careers in law enforcement and firefighting and teaching and public service. The erosion of that interest is tragic in a democracy. Participation is the vitamin in this system of governance, and we have to inspire people to get out and vote and participate and run for office. I hope some of you do as well. I think we'll be fine if we do so, but if people fail to participate in democracy, nefarious interests on the far right and far left will absolutely fill that vacuum. And that's a little bit of a metaphor for what's going on in the world right now. When the United States fails to demonstrate leadership, we have plenty of adversaries who are willing to fill that vacuum, whether it's China, Iran, Russia, or others. And that's why I believe that we should reascend as international leaders, demonstrate to the world what our brand stands for, our values, our principles, invest in young people and in communities, and then raise the expectations of being an American as it relates to civic responsibility and participation. These are things that are easily fixable, but you can't do it with an act of Congress or an act of God. It takes an act of all of us. My work on the Small Business Committee, which has intersected with so many of you, has been quite joyful. I've focused as much as I can on trying to create more of an ownership economy here in the United States. I think you'll all agree that when you generate success and share it, it's good for everybody. To me, there's no greater joy than seeing other people who've worked hard benefit from it. I've been trying to introduce policies and bills that will reward businesses that want to share success with employees, convert to ESOPs, and at the same time, just make doing business easier, which I know is really difficult. And I think I've told you this story before. When I opened our Penny's coffee shops in 2014-15, I intentionally was the guy that walked our plans down into the city halls, including Minneapolis. I'm the guy that navigated all that nonsense. And I thought to myself, if I, having run large businesses, been an entrepreneur with the best access to attorneys and accountants and consultants and resources, a speaker of the English language for all of my 55 years, albeit not very well, if I found it difficult to open a damn coffee shop in the city of Minneapolis, can you imagine? Yes, you can. Many of you have tried, but can you imagine being a new American or someone who doesn't speak the language or is not connected to capital or resources or people trying to open a little cafe or something? It's impossible. And I would also call for all of our communities to start investing in offices of Sherpas, of navigators. I see our cities right now, municipalities and states often, they look for barriers to make it difficult. No, you can't do that. Rather than having an office designed to get to yes. Why don't we assign people to help people build businesses, introduce new concepts and innovations? It's not rocket science. And that's why I'm issuing the request to all of you too, who have some enterprise experience. We need you in government, Democrats and Republicans, people who get this, because you've got too many people making decisions that directly impact business who have no experience whatsoever in business. None. Look at the four, well, I don't want to get too much into politics, but even looking at the four top ticket candidates for the United States president right now. One has significant experience in business, of course, that's Donald Trump. J.D. Vance a little bit in private equity, but it's a shame, I think, when the fundamentals of this country and its economy are not represented in the highest offices in this land. And that means they're more susceptible to lobbyists that may not be looking out for small businesses in the way they do for large. So these are some of my perspectives right now. It is all solvable, but it takes a little bit of a change in how we populate our legislative bodies, our Congress, and executive offices around the country. And I think it's as simple as what you face every day. If you got good people at your business, you're gonna do fine. It doesn't matter if you got a good product or bad. Same as government. If we don't populate our institutions with good people, it doesn't matter what product we might offer, we're gonna fail. So those are some of my perspectives right now. I leave this job, though, overjoyed, with a full heart, and a great deal of gratitude to my state and my community that has given me so much. And I wish more in Congress would pursue gratitude instead of bad attitude. But I just want you to know that this was the most joyful experience of my life, and I'm just getting personal now, and in no small part because of all of you, and your decency and your support, your friendship. So thank you, heartfelt gratitude to you all. There's a lot I could talk about. I got a list and list of notes, but I think it's better to turn it over to you and answer any questions that you might have on your minds. So thank you. Yes?
For you. The next generation of public servants, or the next generation of people who may think about running for office, a lot of them have kind of negative connotations of working in public space. Any advice for anybody or for that next generation maybe coming up through the ranks?
Yeah. So you're talking about negative content, so public service being kind of,
being out in the public eye of
sure.
being that individual, or both being in Congress, both state and national.
Well, look, I grew up in an America in which public service was honorable. That when if you're a Democrat and a Republican won the presidency, whatever, right? And now it's remarkably toxic. I know my children, who are two daughters, 27 and 25, they've never seen Democrats or Republicans act reasonable and responsible and respectfully. And so it's no surprise that young generations have only seen nonsense and vitriol and toxicity. And why would you pursue something that is going to open up every social media account every post you've ever made, right? Talk to every friend you've ever had, find something to destroy you, and if they can't find it, they'll make it. Of course, it's no surprise, and having gone through that, a number of times now, it's no fun. What's that?
She said, where do I sign up?
Yeah, there are. That's the good news is there are a few people that really find some joy in being eviscerated. I think I'm one of them. So with all that said, I mean that's I contemplate my next chapter. That's one thing I'm really going to dedicate myself to, is trying to inspire and cultivate interest in public service. I've talked to police chiefs, I've talked to fire chiefs, to teachers, organizations about how we might collaborate in introducing the importance and the prestige at younger ages. And if you look around the world, and you can look at, especially in some Asian countries, teaching is a great example. They identify young people at young ages who have a talent for teaching, and they put them in a certain track, a special program, and they also pay teachers more. They elevate the esteem, and they literally cultivate them. And we're not doing that. I don't know about all of you and your kids and your experience, but civics should be much more elevated, I think, in our public education system and private, to make it important, because it is foundational. So I'm going to spend some time on that. If you have thoughts, young people in this room, about how I might actually invest some time and energy and resources into that, let me know, because it is a very fulfilling, meaningful job. And yes, it's difficult, and yes, it can be very hard on friendships and yourself and family and time, but boy, the experiences and the joy of just serving a little bit of your time and energy in this remarkable country is something that I wish more people would recognize and appreciate. So those are my 2 cents, and I would call on both parties to end the nonsense. Stop the bullshit and make it appealing. And that's why I've been calling for competition for quite a while. And I think it's true in any category, private sector or public sector. Absent competition that serves the market better, why would we expect anything to change? And yes, would I love to see a party that is decent and promotes freedom and is pro-business, but also believes in helping people to become self-sufficient and being socially reasonable? Do I think that would serve the nation's interest and maybe change its whole dynamic and actually then recruit the very people that right now are staying on the sidelines? Yeah, but we're never going to know unless we act as political entrepreneurs. So there you have it. Yeah, in the very back, in the black shirt. Yeah.
Okay, I have friends both on the liberal and conservative side. And when your name would come up, both sides would say, that's somebody we could support. You made a gallant effort to go after it. And it seems like you stopped too soon. Why did you do that? Was it an impossible task?
Yeah, too soon is relative, I suppose. That's pretty long to me. I'll tell you, I would have probably wanted to serve longer. There's no question. I saw some things that I'd still like to do and ways to do it. But I also recognize that when I made the decision to speak the truth, that not only would it not be rewarded, but it would likely result in the end of my career. Rather that be by the party making it difficult, or by me coming to the conclusion that I have, that serving with people who have so disappointed me, people that have really disappointed me, whether I could do that in a fashion that would be accretive to my community. And I decided, especially on the latter, that it wouldn't. I had really become so disappointed in people that I knew better. And I'll start with my Republican friends, who to this very day, 95% of them despise Donald Trump. And then they get in front of the cameras and they glorify him. And I had the same thing on my side was 99%. I was the only one. 99% knew that Joe Biden, a good man, was not in a position to do that. Not only not to do it another 4 years, but he wasn't going to win. And nobody would raise a finger, let alone open their mouth. And to work with people that are willing to compromise their principles in the spirit of their own personal self-preservation is really difficult. And that was probably the thing that really forced my own decision to pass the torch. There you have it. So that's the why. I'm not saying never again, because I love public service, but I think I can maybe make a bigger difference on what I want to change from the outside now that I have that experience on the inside. Yeah, and then next year.
So I want to just applaud you for that, because I think you took the high road, and I really appreciate that, so thank you. But my question is, what's the solution to the financial situation that you described earlier in the month?
Our federal budget?
Right. A few tidbits
Yeah.
of the solution, I think.
Well, I'll tell you, I've spoken with Senator Romney about this for some years now. We've tried to we've been proposed, incentivized, demanded some type of a fiscal sanity commission that would make very specific recommendations on what can be done to address this. And then most important, because this has been done a number of times before, but that's not a solution, that's the investigation. The solution is having something with teeth that requires the implementation of some of these. And what happens, as you can imagine, is no one wants to take the political risk of raising taxes, right, or cutting spending, because there's no reward. So that's the crux of this real problem, is how do you take common sense ideas to fix this and actually get it done amongst in a culture in which nobody has the courage to lose their job to do the right thing. That's another, so my solution, term limits. I've seen across the board, Democrats, Republicans, old and young, those who are no longer serving in the next term, whether they lost an election or they have a health issue or they're retiring, I've seen it 1,000 times. Comprehensive changes in their disposition socially and their voting records, because they're liberated. So I think term limits might actually, if we did it in the right way, I believe 18 years total in the Congress between the House and Senate, 18 years I think in the Supreme Court. If we managed it the right way, we might just have a critical mass large enough and liberated enough to make the right decisions, act as leaders. That's one way. It's not rocket science about what we need to do. I mean, by the way, if you want to really dig in the details, there's a group called USA Facts, started by Steve Ballmer from Microsoft. He's the only one so far to have taken the United States, basically, balance sheet and P&L, and put it into very understandable documentation. And you can Google it, go to their website, you can order their books. You can really see where the monies are spent. And my goodness, it is astounding. It is astounding. And when I ran for president, I proposed the first thing I would do is have a bipartisan cabinet, and I would initiate a comprehensive study of the U.S. federal expenditures by an international consulting firm that would make recommendations on how we could restructure government, deliver services better, improve customer service, and provide good value, and outsource what we do not do well. That seems to be the best solution. So I'll leave it at that. Term limits in the legislative bodies, so we actually have people willing to make tough decisions, and then an assessment with recommendations from an independent consulting agency that would at least give us a blueprint on how we can make change. And then, last and most importantly, is all of us. If we continue to just elect people who aren't going to do anything, we're going to get what we pay for. And we are paying for it. It's really expensive. And that's why participation in primaries and, of course, general elections, to me, are the linchpin of all of this. We got to recruit people who are willing to do the right thing. Yeah, and I'll come to this second.
Hi,
Hey.
I'm Bill James.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. I'm going to pivot to some world affairs
Please.
thoughts here. We just moved our third aircraft carrier combat battle group into the Middle East with two very powerful nuclear Virginia-class submarines.
Yep.
Takes roughly about $4.5 million an hour to run one aircraft carrier. And so I understand the reason that the Department of the Navy and the DoD is doing that positioning with respect to the threats from coming out of Iran and Lebanon. I just would appreciate your thoughts on what you see for 90, 120 days out.
Yeah, well, it starts with it's complicated. As the ranking member of the Middle East Subcommittee, I've been to the Middle East a number of times, met with Netanyahu twice in the last 12 months, expressed grave concerns before October 7th about what many of us had foreseen as great risk to the state of Israel and its future. And I've been deeply concerned and disappointed and frankly horrified, like I'm sure all of you are. Both the attack on October 7th, which was just nauseating, and then what has happened since. And no matter how one looks at this issue, or more empathy for Israel or Palestinians, the loss of human life and children and parents is it's horrifying. And frankly, I'm going to draw a line here to Ukraine too, because I think to answer your question well, I think you got to talk about both. Which is, there have been hundreds of thousands of deaths now in Ukraine. And again, no matter who you support, I imagine most of us support Ukraine. That means hundreds of thousands of moms and dads in Russia and children and spouses, have lost loved ones, whose names we'll never know, but were human beings. And Ukraine, children's hospitals and schools bombed. It's so nauseating that it's hard to actually believe that this is really happening in this day and age. And the answer to your question about the next 120 days, I had to go backwards first, which is, we knew that Putin was amassing troops on the border in Ukraine. We knew it for weeks before they entered. You know, Barack Obama knew that when Putin took Crimea, if it was met with no penalty, that he would probably continue his march eventually. You know, we know that if you deny human beings healthcare and education and self-determination and possibility and opportunity, that they will act in ways that we consider irrational and horrifying. And I'm talking about Palestinians right now. We know that. You know? And we have done nothing to address the root issues of these two circumstances. And here we find ourselves now, to your point, sending fleets to the Middle East, you know, facing, God forbid, nuclear disaster if an Iran or North Korea goes crazy. And I have to look back. You know, we need leaders in the White House on both sides of the aisle that recognize threats and address them before they become acute too far down the road. In the Middle East, eventually, if we do not somehow find a way to decapitate the Iranian regime, this will never, ever change. You know, this is not the Iranian people, by the way, who are extraordinarily opposed to their own regime. But as long as they are in place, they will continue to wreak havoc around the world. So my proposition is, got to address Iran somehow, some way, someday. It might be sooner rather than later. And we have got to create a second state next to Israel for Palestinians and create some type of a Marshall Plan to at least give them one chance, right? One chance. Because if you do not afford the basics to human beings, they will take it from your neighbor. It's just the way it works. That's the source of crime, let alone terrorism. And that's what we have to do. And I say that, now some people say that's impossible, they don't want peace, or it'll never work. Well, it's the only thing that we haven't tried. It's the only thing we haven't tried, and I love Israel, and if they can be attacked in a way that loses 1,200 Israeli lives in one day because of a bunch of drones and pickup trucks, and we're not talking about nuclear weapons and significant technology here, then that can happen anytime and it will continue to. And that's why our investments in diplomacy are so important, and China should not be our arch enemy, they should be our competitor. It's going to be complicated, but we should not make them the very enemy that we have to now defend ourselves against. And we've got to work with the rest of the world to contain threats that we have no access to do directly. That means Russia and others. And we have to be thinking about a post-Putin Russia, a post-Israel, a post-Netanyahu Israel, and a post-Iranian regime Iran. We used to do this better, I think, and we are not very good right now at reading the tea leaves and forming the partnerships and making the investments to prevent disaster. That's why we have a healthcare system, by the way, that is not healthcare, it's sick care. We wait until you're sick, and then we spend 3 times more than we would have had to if we simply put a little bit of money into your health. We got to change our mindset. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, maybe a fire preventer, not
A fire preventer. I mean, it's the human nature is you try to prevent things that you can anticipate, except government seems to do it the opposite. In fact, government's often the arsonist and the firefighters.
Exactly.
How about this side of the room? Any? Yeah.
Hi, Congressman. Governor Walz
Yeah.
seems to have captured the imagination, certainly,
He sure has.
and the zeitgeist of the country, now that he's been asked to join the Harris ticket. I'm wondering if you have spoken to Governor Walz since that happened. He's off barnstorming at the moment, but I'm wondering what your impression is of that splash that's been made,
Yeah.
and if you've talked to him and how he's feeling about it.
Yeah, well, directly to answer your question, I've not spoken with him since he was elevated, but I corresponded with him to congratulate him. And that I ran for president not thinking that I had a good chance of actually securing the nomination, because it's designed to prevent that. But I did do it to inspire a conversation I knew would have to be had, and to speak the truth. And that change happened. And if you had told me 6 months ago that Tim Walz would be, possible, I would have said I don't think so. But I have to say, but and I say this, no matter your politics, and I'm very objective on these things. I had called for competition when Biden left. I was thrilled that he finally made the decision. It was overdue. And I still thought that this was still a time to still do some auditioning, have some town halls, and let others participate in the conversation to at least educate the delegates who will be making the choice and introduce to Americans. And we didn't do that. But Tim Walz and Kamala Harris did something pretty remarkable, to your point. The way that Kamala Harris consolidated support within the Democratic apparatus so quickly is a demonstration of leadership. That does not happen organically. Let me just tell you that. It does not happen organically. That takes good people, a good strategy, and an activation, flipping the switch. Same with Tim Walz. I think there will be stories told that express that this was well coordinated by him about how to introduce himself, when, in what context, and that's why he skyrocketed from, and also ran to the top of the VP ticket. I love the fact that we might have a Minnesotan in the VP's office, no matter your politics. And if he is, he will be the third Democratic vice president of the last 6 Democratic vice presidents from Minnesota, which is such a metaphor for us. We're like number 2, but we always try harder, you know. And look, and again, back to to Tim Walz, just reflecting on his background. Of course, a teacher, a National Guardsman, and someone who represented a pretty red district in Congress for a long time and was very moderate in Congress and focused most of his time on Veterans Affairs and quite effectively. Of course, he moved quite left in Minnesota, no surprise to any of you. I think his heart is more centrist and reasonable, and time will tell. The race, if you asked me a week ago who I thought would win this election, I still would have said Donald Trump. The numbers indicated that. But to your point, there's something is shifting pretty quickly in those 6 battleground states, and now I would probably have to put the money on Harris and Walz. And my hope and expectation is that both of them will regress to their centrism. A prosecutor who had to run away from her best strength in 2020, and in this case, a teacher, National Guardsman governor who kind of can come back, I think, to his roots. And that's what the country wants. And that's what I'm going to be trying to work to inspire. And when I do speak with him, I'll celebrate it. Last thing I'll say about that, too, is that, he said some words about me that were disappointing, when I was pursuing my run for president. I knew he knew better. And I just want to let you know that at the end of the day, I find it more important to promote a Minnesotan and do right and be respectful and demonstrate the behavior I wish other politicians would exhibit by celebrating. And so no bad blood between us. And I just hope that we have, I hope we have a Minnesotan in the White House. And if he was a Republican, I'd still hope we had a Minnesotan in the White House. Or not, I mean, not the White House, the observatory, wherever the vice president lives, sorry. Yeah. Yes?
If you could create any legislation for Minnesota, what would it be?
Thank you. So the bill, the legislation, well, I'm working on a few things right now. One is, it's on a kind of low level, Ports Pirates Act, which is, this is kind of, it was news to me, but anybody in this room had a package stolen from?
Yeah.
Okay. You might not know, but if it's a United States Postal Service package and that is stolen, that's a federal felony and some real teeth on that. That's why most of these porch pirates target UPS, Amazon, and FedEx packages, because that's just a local misdemeanor. And they know damn well they could steal hundreds of these things, and the chances are they'll get a slap on the wrist. So we have a bill that would make it a federal felony to steal any package from someone's yard so that we have teeth. That's one. And that came from people complaining. Another area of complaint is electronic devices in classrooms, and looking at first a study, but then maybe some legislation to limit those devices in classrooms, let teachers teach, and then help parents try to maintain some degree of control, especially over young kids' use of mobile devices in schools. But the legislation that would help Minnesotans, and I think this country in extraordinary ways, is something that I call the American Dream Accounts Act. And this has a more of a Republican roots. The notion is to create a $5,000 investment account for every baby born in America. It costs $18 billion a year. Just to give you a comparison, the state of California spends $17.5 billion a year on incarceration alone. This is $18 billion nationwide for the 3.5 million babies. $5,000 put into a S&P 500 index fund would grow for 18 years. When, as an incentive to graduate high school, that account would vest and become yours. Probably worth then $20,000, $25,000 if we have general compounded growth. And the idea is, we've got a Social Security program that works beautifully. The best anti-poverty program in world history, takes care of people at the end of their career. I don't know why we wouldn't look at Social Security also in the beginning of a career. Imagine Imagine a $25,000 nest egg. You could start a small business, down payment on a house, pay for expenses, not rely on government programs, and actually inspire some degree of self-sufficiency and have a reward for staying in school and graduating. Or get a GED. $18 billion a year, a lot of money. But like I said, in the big scheme of things, it seems to be a very modest investment that would accrue to every single American baby, no matter their circumstances, and give everybody the same chance, the same chance. That's the kind of thinking and innovation and investment that I dream about, and it has some bipartisan support. I hope someday maybe we will look at it that way, that we don't then have to keep spending so much on programs and handouts and incarceration. And that's the other thing. I wish we could also be a country that would actually invest in rehabilitating, educating criminals, instead of thinking that if we just put you in a concrete jail cell with a bunch of other criminals, that you will emerge as an upstanding member of society. And by the way, you can't get a job. I mean, come on, folks. You know, this is not, it's strange to say these things in a country that is so extraordinary. So those are the areas that I really believe we need to focus on. Early investment and preparing, educating, and rehabilitating people, whether it's criminal activity, addiction, drug use, because the investments generate returns. And right now, we simply put Band-Aids on that cost so much more. Yeah.
So, listening to you, I get the impression that you are a sensible, thoughtful, well-spoken person.
And a good actor, obviously.
And then, I haven't met many, but I've seen them on TV, these guys that act, and they're in the same Congress as you, that they're freaks, and they absolutely say absolutely unreal, absurd things. And it's on both sides.
Sure.
So what's the ratio?
The freak to geek to, I'll tell you that, I think about this a lot because this question comes up sometimes. The overwhelming majority of members of Congress are really decent. A room like this, I mean, it's good people. Our founders wanted a Congress comprised of people that would represent everybody in America. And it does, the best and the worst, and you can imagine. But those that are causing the problems, those that literally seem to be there only for personal benefit, to be disruptive, it is really a small handful. And it might be a dozen people, really a dozen people. But because of the human condition, Angertainment at night, when they feature these 6 people on the left, or half a dozen on the right, that's what becomes the brand of each party. That's what defines the news cycle. That's what defines actually what we talk about the next day. Because every time a Marjorie Taylor Greene goes on, Newsmax or something and says something nuts, every reporter the next day wants to ask us about that. Not about investing in small businesses or improving the tax code or helping improving education. It's about what did Marjorie Taylor Greene or Donald Trump say last night, or do you think Joe Biden's too old, or did Ilhan Omar say something anti-Semitic? That's all we hear from reporters. I don't know what happened to journalism, but that's the truth. It's a small handful of people. You would be surprised by the relationships in Congress. You'd be surprised to know that Matt Gaetz and AOC are really friendly, because one day he defended her on the steps when someone on his side of the aisle was being really rude. You'd never know that. You'd never know that Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff to Donald Trump, the founder of the Freedom Caucus, when he issued a eulogy for a dear member of the Democratic caucus who passed away about 5 years ago, in his eulogy, he told everybody in the rotunda that day that they were dear friends. Elijah Cummings, black member of Congress from Baltimore, uber liberal, and then you had Mark Meadows, the Freedom Caucus chair, in tears talking about their relationship. And his closing words were, imagine how much better our country and world would be with more unlikely friendships. So forget about those 12 people. There are so many unlikely friendships in Congress. Many of my dearest friendships are Republicans, some of whom you know, many of whom you don't. And that's the truth, but we are really struggling to distribute that truth because the media environment has realized it doesn't attract eyeballs. So talk about an entrepreneurial challenge. How do we kind of fight that human condition to be far more focused on things that make us afraid so we can protect ourselves, and become a little bit more interested in hearing about things that might bring us a little bit of optimism and joy and peace and the like. So those are the truths. I've met very few people who are just downright jerks, but they're there and they're quite loud. It's just like high school.
Congressman, I'm going to jump in. We get about 10 minutes left,
Okay.
but want to be sure you touch on the economy.
Yeah.
You mentioned businesses.
Sure.
We hear from our businesses costs still very high.
Okay.
Discretionary spending is a question mark.
Yeah.
The Fed, housing, all those things
Right.
play into the economy and what's impacting it.
Okay, so yeah, let me give you my take. My take right now. You just saw the inflation is coming down. You just saw the most recent report. That's good, but price costs are still, as we all know, much. Just looking at the growth of inflation, is one thing, but looking at the change in costs of goods and services and people and labor, I mean, you know better than anyone. It is really, really difficult. Let alone, and this is where Joe Biden really misunderstood what was going on. What he failed to realize too is that during COVID and during the Trump administration, people, I think it's about 50% of Americans had more money than they'd ever had before. Remember, we sent checks with Donald Trump's name on it, right into your account. We issued PPP, dollars to small businesses. You couldn't spend because a lot of, either by choice or by shutdowns, the economy was shrinking. You couldn't go out and spend it. Money was coming into your account, and people felt flush. And then inflation takes root. The economy opens up, right? The checks stop coming in, and people realize how quickly not only were those extra dollars depleted, now they're actually underwater. And that's the truth. And you all know this. The disparities in wealth and income in this country are becoming, I think, tragic almost. And I believe in capitalism, and I believe people who work hard and take risks should be rewarded for it. But when we are losing the middle class, and when we are seeing small businesses fail because of regulatory issues and high costs and lack of support, we are really failing, I think, the most important segments of this country. And that's going to have consequences, I think, with a very, very long tail. I see, you all have seen some of these indicators too. We're probably at the precipice of a modest recession. I do think, the Fed has made it pretty clear. I think some cuts are forthcoming, and that's their lever. And I think by resisting cuts earlier, we'll have a little bit more opportunity to navigate through some rough waters, perhaps coming up. And I will ask this question of all of you, because there is no better canary in the coal mine than a room like this. Indicators are one thing. But if anybody wants to share with me what you are feeling, sensing, hearing, what are your numbers looking like, staffing challenges, I'd like to hear, because that's the real data that we should use to make decisions. I will say too that the United States is in a much better place economically than most countries in the world, but that does not make it good for everybody. And I'm really concerned about this growing extraordinary concentration of extreme wealth, and increasingly difficult for people just to save enough to send their kids to school, go to Disneyland once a year, and just get by. And that's a different issue than the economic indicators that generally have been pretty strong. And then couple all this with, of course, fiscal irresponsibility at the federal level. We've got some real issues between monetary and fiscal policy in this country. And that's my current take. And I just would like to see our country afford capital, make it available to people more easily, and find some ways to simply raise the foundation for everybody, for small businesses, as it relates to healthcare, as it relates to education, boost the foundation so that people can become more successful, and reduce the red tape for small businesses and regulations that are unnecessary. Some are necessary, some are unnecessary, and we should be rewarding small businesses. And I'm concerned that our policies right now are favoring large ones because they have representation in Washington that is very effective, and I'm just afraid that the people that have the best ideas and the most important needs are not being heard as well. And those are intersections of the question you just posed, Pat, and I think what we need to do better.
Time for maybe two more questions.
Yeah.
Two-parter for you, sir. First, geographically, where do you see yourself landing? Will you be back in Minnesota? Will you stay in Washington? And second part, is there perhaps not a more local statewide position that may come open that might appeal to you, where you could perhaps address some of these on a statewide basis?
I hate, I've trained myself to never say I don't know, but I don't know. I love Minnesota. My relationship with my state has changed, there's no question. When you serve in this capacity and look at it from outside and see so many other places in the world and around our own country, of course that relationship changes and new possibilities emerge. I don't know where I will land and what I will do. I care deeply about our state, and I think that we can and should be doing things that had so well defined this state for so long that might be feeling a little bit precarious right now. But the current political environment, like I said, is not accruing to people like me very well right now. And I think you understand what I'm saying. And that plays into my consideration as I contemplate how to best serve my state and my country. Because it's tough enough to win a tough race. It's really painful to go through bloodbaths that increasingly define statewide elections in just about every capacity right now. But I'm keeping my heart and mind open, and I anticipate trying to make a difference here in some way, shape, or form. I just don't know exactly when. And this was not some grand plan to get Walls out of here so I could run for governor. Let me assure you.
I think a nice turnaround in that area, though, would make a good point, let's say.
Sorry, say it again?
Making a change on this
yeah.
statewide might make a nice statement on
I do appreciate it. I really do. And stay tuned. Maybe some rapid, the last few here, and maybe just rapid fire, and I'll answer them together. Who has? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Steve Schuh.
Yes, nice to see you. Yeah.
You had great hopes for the Problem Solvers Caucus when you first were elected.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like much impact. Why not? And what would you advise to create sort of a critical mass in the center that could have addressed some of the systemic contradictions that you're talking about?
All right. So problem solvers. Were there a couple other questions? I'll answer that. Yeah.
Exodus of young adults pursuing education in other states with no intention to come back to Minnesota.
Okay.
Mine is connected. Is this the time, the place, the moment to address the divisiveness, the fiscal responsibility, by appealing to all of us, most of us, the vast majority of us who are moderates, and have a third party involved?
All right, good. I like this. So starting with the Problem Solvers Caucus, I joke, but it's kind of true. I was more eager to join the Problem Solvers Caucus than the U.S. Congress because, in my estimation, they were doing what the Congress should be doing, which is congregating, learning from each other, digesting information together, and hopefully demonstrating the courage to get things done. And it does take courage. We did a lot of good behind the scenes. Our MO was to do important work, meaningful work, move the needle, but do it quietly, because the whale, as my great-grandfather would tell me, the whale who spouts gets harpooned. And there's some, especially in Washington, let me assure you. And it's not easy when you are ambitious and aspirational, and you do something good and you don't want to take credit for it. I mean, have you ever seen a politician they take credit for everything they didn't do, let alone what they did. So that was our MO, and I'm proud of the work we did. But we suffered because the public didn't really know what we were doing behind the scenes. What has saddened me, and few are aware, is that in this last session of Congress, our group is really threatened with erosion, emanating mostly from the Kevin McCarthy debacle, where Republican colleagues wanted Democrats to come to his rescue when he when the coup occurred, if you will. And I share that with you because it's an interesting perspective on what's really going on. We did come to the rescue of Mike Johnson, who is not nearly as close to the Problem Solvers Caucus as Kevin McCarthy was. So you'd ask, why would we do it for him but not McCarthy? Well, McCarthy said a couple things a couple days before he was exited about Democrats broadly that were deeply offensive and stupid publicly. He never asked any of us for a vote and didn't actually come and meet with our caucus to say, would you support me in sticking around? And look, if you're not going to ask and you're going to say disparaging things, we're not going to proactively put our jobs on the line for you. That's just the way it works. And that created a real fissure in our group, and it has been hard to repair. And I'm concerned right now that it might disband altogether, which would be, I think, a real tragedy for the Congress. And that's where we're at right now, unfortunately. So, as for
Third party.
yeah, well, let me go to the Minnesota young people leaving the state. You know, I'll tell you one of the neatest things about my job in the last 6 years is discovering Minnesotans all around the country and all around the world doing extraordinary things. I've always known, you know, we always, you know, between Bob Dylan and others, you know, we export a lot of great talent, but I've been amazed how a state our size has such an impact in so many ways. Just in the Foreign Service, the number of senior level State Department officials with Minnesota connections is amazing. The number of administration positions. Dennis McDonough, the Secretary of the Veterans Affairs. Jake Sullivan, who's the National Security Advisor. I mean, we have some serious Minnesota talent that goes elsewhere. And in a way, that's very Minnesota. You know, we have an extraordinary community. We invest in parks and schools and people, and they go elsewhere, and it's complicated. The good news is, I'm sure you're all seeing this amongst either yourselves, your friends, even family. You know, there's a trend of people ultimately coming back, because when you live in New York City or Washington or Los Angeles or other cities or states, you kind of realize how good it is here. And I'm seeing people come back. We're never going to win on weather, right? You know, we're never going to win on size. What we got to start winning on is innovation, back like we used to. And that's not easy, but I think, and I'll say lastly too, because of the labor crunch, if we don't find some mechanism to inspire people to move here, yeah, then actually we're in trouble. Forget Minnesotans, just people generally, as you guys all know. So that's on my mind, but I think that's the beautiful thing about Minnesota, is we produce extraordinary people. They go do extraordinary things. Many of them maintain a connection here, but like all of you, I always feel a little bit crummy when an awesome person, goes and makes it big somewhere else and leaves. That's why I love Prince, kept his place in our district. Last question was about the third party thing in Minnesota. I hope that happens. I just hope it happens. I'm a Democrat, and I'm a Humphrey Democrat, I'm a Bill Clinton Democrat. The party's not there anymore, no question. And those of you who are Republicans, the party ain't the Reagan party anymore either. And that to me has created, from an entrepreneurial perspective, perhaps the greatest opportunity I've ever seen, ever, where you have 350 million people, over 50% of whom don't want the products offered by Coke and Pepsi. So why shouldn't there be a Red Bull, is I guess my message, right? And when Coke and Pepsi own all the distribution networks, and they're the biggest in the world, and they can use money and influence and people and other mechanisms to keep you out, you gotta be scrappy. And if you know the story of Red Bull, and it's a good metaphor, they couldn't get distributed to all the big stores, so they found entrepreneurs, teenagers, high school, college students, who would have access to a truck, and they literally empowered these people to become distributors, knocking on doors, going into bars, starting a distribution network. And they created one of the biggest brands in the world. But it takes that kind of entrepreneurial incentive and inspiration to do it. We've been talking about it for a long time, and I just think it's time. I think it's time. And when you point at me or ask me about my future, yeah, I would like to play a role in creating space and place, and perhaps a corpus, money necessary to start doing that. Not to run a presidential candidate in 2028, but to start building the foundation for next generation American democracy of decency and respect and competency and integrity and a pro-business and pro-person kind of party. And I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I think they're mutually mandatory. So I'll leave it at that.
What would you call it?
The question is, what would I call the party? Yeah. So Steve asked, what would I call this party? That I didn't propose I create, but I know what you're saying. Having done with the Problem Solvers Caucus, we did some research on words to which most Americans that are kind of our community, if you will, moderate, reasonable people, respond to. And the words that always tested best, this is Frank Luntz, who some of you might know, the words that test best are common sense. It's the most unifying, no matter your politics, no matter where you come from, your race, religion, your pursuits, common sense seems to be just a unifying truth. And we all kind of know what it means, even if we express it differently. So I think common sense should have some kind of root in a new party initiative. Not a color, or not a, so you got it. I think just to wrap it up, thank you all so much. I love these experiences. Next time I might be with you sitting at one of those tables while we watch someone else lament the state of affairs. But I gotta tell you, be optimistic. We are so damn lucky to live in a country, in a state, in a time that billions of human beings through history could never have dreamt of. And we are the beneficiaries of them. So that makes my heart filled with humility and gratitude to all of you, and keep the faith, keep in touch. Lastly, if any of you want to come to Washington before January, I have some time on my hands, and I give a pretty damn good tour of the Capitol. I think some of you have seen it. I'd love to see you, so come on out, bring your kids, take a weekend. We do donuts with Dean many Fridays when we have Minnesotans in town, and I'd like to show you this extraordinary temple of democracy and inspire people to participate. So Godspeed, thank you all very, very much.